What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. I'm that Scottish nerd that brings you Pokemon TCG content, so if that's something that interests you, be sure to hit subscribe down below, as I do post videos multiple times a week. And we are once again looking at more new decks from the Battle Styles set. In today's video we have Victini VMAX with Centiskorch VMAX, and there are timestamps down below if you want to skip around at any point. Here is one of the most hyped cards from the new Battle Styles deck, and it is of course the Victini VMAX, and for good reason for it to be hyped is the big attack here is the max victory for 2 energy. Doesn't even have to be 2 fire energy, just fire and a colorless energy does 100 damage, which you would think is pretty mediocre, and it is, but if your opponent's defending Pokemon is a Pokemon V, then you're going to be able to deal 120 more damage. So that's a total of 220 damage. That is enough to knock out almost every Pokemon V, which is a basic, as well as 2-hit all of the Pokemon V Max. So very powerful attack, as well as the support that Fire has right now. It's going to be a very powerful Pokemon V Max. The first attack here, as well, Spreading Flames, allows you to attach 3 energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way that you like, so can be a good attack to get set up as well. And overall here is the deck. We'll go through some of the Pokemon and supporting Pokemon and trainers that we have, all of that good stuff. It is a bit of a split here, but we'll get into that in a second. We see we are playing the old Victini. I say old, it's not that old, but the old Victini V from Sword and Shield base set. Since it is my preferred one, the new one is reasonable, but this one also has Spreading Flames, and then the Energy Burst attack does 30 damage, times the amount of energy attached to both active Pokemon. I just find this to be a much better overall attack compared to the new Victini V from Battle Styles. But going into our other attackers, since we do have a 2-2 line of Victini VMAX, we also have a 2-2 line of Centiskorch VMAX. So Centiskorch VMAX here, it does have the G-Max Centiferno attack, does 40 base damage, but then an additional 40 damage for each fire energy attached to this Pokemon. So if you have 2 fire energy attached to this Pokemon, you're going to be dealing a base of 120. But then as well, on top of that, when you use this attack, you also get a fire energy from your discard pile and get to attach it to this Pokemon. So on the following turn, you're going to be dealing 160 damage. So it ramps up very quickly, and with things like Welder, you're going to be attaching a lot of energy as well. Very powerful attack, and really love this Pokemon, as well as the art, so that's why I had to use the shiny version of the card. Of course, we have the Centiskorch V. This is the one that we've always had, we don't have any alternatives, and it is still reasonable. It has the Radiating Heat as the main attack, which allows you to do 20 damage and then discard an energy if you wish, and that also makes your opponent discard energy from their active. So reasonable attack, but for the most part we're just focused on the VMAX here, dealing a whole bunch of damage. And the main reason for going for a split of Victini VMAX and Centiskorch VMAX is that the Victini VMAX here only deals additional damage to Pokemon V. So if you're against a lot of tag team heavy decks, or if you're against a non-Pokemon V deck, then you're really going to struggle against those, and those are the matchups where you're going to need the Centiskorch VMAX to come in clutch and deal a whole bunch of damage instead. But we also have 4 full count of Volcanion here, so the 4 Volcanion, because the Flare Starter attack is so powerful, putting a fire energy on, and then if you go second, you get to search your deck and attach 3 fire energy onto your Pokemon any way that you like. Very powerful for getting your Centiskorch set up, as well as your Victini as well, but that only requires 2 energy. And then also going in with a High Heat Blast if we want to, as we can deal 120 damage for 2 energy, but we do have to have 4 energy at least in play. That is fairly reasonable though if you do use the Flare Starter to begin with. This is also in here to counter the annoying decks, so things like Decidueye and also the Altaria, which has Miraculous Charm, things that stop Pokemon V from being able to attack. You're going to be able to use this Volcanion to really run through those Pokemon and get easy one-hit knockouts, since the Altaria has 110 HP and the Decidueye is weak to fire, so both of those are easily knocked out with Volcanion. And of course, finishing off our Pokemon, we have a Heatran GX here as another nice attacker. It's also a 2-prizer, so if you want to go in, hit with a VMAX, then come in with the Heatran, and then hit with another VMAX afterwards, this is a great way to do it because the Steaming Stomp is nice numbers, hitting for 130. And then the GX attack, of course, Hot Burn GX, 50 damage for each fire energy attached to this Pokemon, and the fact that you can move energy off of all of the other Pokemon and onto this Pokemon with its ability makes for a really fantastic and spicy attacker that your opponent isn't going to be expecting because you can play it out of nowhere. Then of course we also have one Crobat and one Dedenne just for some additional draw, but we do have a lot of draw in the way of our supporter cards here. So we have the 4 count of Welder, of course. We are a fire deck, so you have to be playing 4 Welder. Attaching 2 fire energy from hand and drawing 3 is a no-brainer because it is so powerful. And then we have our 4 Research, a couple of Marnie, a couple of Boss's Orders, and another new addition to the deck from Battle Styles is Cheryl. Not seen this played quite all that much in the VMAX decks, or the Fire VMAX decks anyway, Victini and Centiskorch, but it just makes a lot of sense in this kind of deck because you can go in, attack with an attacker which is only requiring 2 energy to attack, and then you can just retreat into something else and hit with something else and use Cheryl to heal all of the damage off one of your VMAX Pokemon so that it's completely ready to go for the rest of the game and you're not going to be giving up 3 prize cards. We also have a Great Catcher and a Pal Pad so that we can reuse our Cheryls or Boss's Orders, even Welders if we need to, as well as a couple of Air Balloon. And then finally rounding out for the energy, we have 11 energy and then a couple of copies of the Weakness Guard energy. If you're up against a water deck, you are going to be struggling as that is your weakness, and that's just the way it goes in Pokemon unfortunately, but we do try and cover this a little bit with a couple of counts of Weakness Guard energy. So if you don't really want to be caring about those matchups and you just take it as an auto loss, then you can feel free to cut these, but considering the amount of speed and power that we have in the deck and just pure aggression, I've decided to include a couple of copies of Weakness Guard energy. So we'll get into a couple of battles, show off just how aggressive this deck is and how fast it's able to get set up and consistently as well. And of course be sure to give a like on this video if you did enjoy it at any point. So let's get into a couple of battles. Starting off our first match of the video, we do have a Centiskorch V in the active spot. Definitely not the best hand to start off with, as we definitely want to see the Volcanion in the active spot, especially since we're going second here. You typically want to be going second since we do have so many Volcanion to work with, as well as the Welders. Being able to accelerate so many energy in this deck, you want to be going second pretty much every single game. There is the Volcanion, a little bit too late, although we could still be able to retreat into it, so we will be attaching the energy onto the Volcanion. We'll go with the Crobat so that we can dig even further into the deck. And unfortunately we don't get the Air Balloon just yet, so we're going to have to use our Professor Research to discard our hand and see if we can get one. We do get into the Air Balloon, so that's excellent, but the Centiskorch does have a 3 retreat cost, and there's not much else that we can really do from this point, so we are just going to pass it over to my opponent. And we can always go and get ourselves some energy on this following turn, as well as draw some more cards with something like Dedenne. My opponent has Hop to draw 3 cards, and they also have the Pokemon Communication, and they're going to be searching for a Pokemon. They get themselves a Centiskorch here, and they're going to be putting it in order to get the previous evolution. So my opponent goes for the attack. They get the Tails, so they're not able to deal any damage, and we draw into the Welder, which is going to be fantastic as we do have the Evolution Incense here, so we can grab the Centiskorch VMAX and slap that right onto the active, and then we also put down our Giant Hearth, discarding a card from our hand. Then we'll get rid of the Volcanion, we're not going to need that anymore, and we do have plenty more if we do want to attack with it at some point. Then we're going to be using our Welder to attach 2 of these energy onto the active and drawing ourselves 3 cards. We get into another Volcanion, so we're going to use one of these quick balls to get rid of that Volcanion as well. And we can get ourselves, let's get the Victini, Although I don't think, my opponent doesn't have a lot of VMAXs down, so I think Centiskorch is actually going to be better overall in this matchup, so we will lean towards the Centiskorch here. And then we can also attach a third energy onto the active and go for the attack, dealing enough damage, 160 in fact, to get a knockout. And then we also get an energy from the discard pile, so on the following turn we will be able to deal 200 damage. And as you can see, the damage is just going to ramp up really quickly with the Centiskorch VMAX. My opponent did have the Burning Scarf, so they are going to be burning us now, which is a bit of a shame, but that's fine. We can deal with a little bit of burn damage as my opponent just puts up the Snorlax with the Gormandize, something that we can easily knock out. And we do have a bunch of ways to draw cards as well coming up here. My opponent is going to be making use of the Giant Hearth on their end, getting themselves 2 fire energy, and they're going to be looking to attach it onto their benched Sizzlepede, whatever. And yeah, we'll see what they go for. They get a Quick Ball, getting another Growlithe, and they're going to be using a Welder to put 1 onto the Growlithe as well, drawing themselves 3 cards, and just really setting up their board. Considering they are an evolution based deck, they are taking a little while to get set up, as we do have a similar deck considering we're both playing the Centiskorch. Now it's going to be going into our turn. We are cured from the burn, which is great, and we can start attaching energy onto our benched Pokemons here. We have a Quick Ball, we can get rid of one of these Professor Researches, and we can grab ourselves the Heatran GX just in case we want to make use of that at some point, and we'll go for the Professor Research, discarding our hand, and we don't get anything too crazy right now that we want to be making use of, so we'll just go for an attack once again, getting a knockout on the Snorlax and getting more energy into play onto our Centiskorch VMAX. As we're going to give us our second prize card of the game, we get into a Cheryl off the prizes, so if we do happen to take a lot of damage, then we will be able to heal all of that damage up and then start attacking with a different Pokemon, for example. My opponent has the Giant Hearth going again, so they're able to use our Stadium to get them 2 fire energy out of the deck, and then they're also going to be able to Pokegear for a Welder, and then use Evolution Incense, most likely getting themselves the Arcanine to go into the Growlithe here. Let's see if that's what they go for, or if they want to get something else. Yep, there is the Arcanine. They're going to be evolving into that Pokemon, so we can have a look at the attacks here. It has Grand Flame for 120, and you put 2 fire energy onto one of your bench Pokemon, and this Pokemon does 50 damage to itself for 190. So some reasonable attacks there, definitely not something too insane, and considering the energy cost as well, like 190 for 4 energy is yeah, it's definitely not the best attack in the world. But we'll see what my opponent goes for. They are going to be hitting us with the Grand Flame for 120, and they get to put 2 energy onto one of their benched Pokemon. So now we do have some options. We could attach onto a Pokemon, we could retreat and start hitting with our Heatran if we wanted to. This defending Pokemon does have 140, so it's slightly out of range of the Heatran unless we go for our GX attack. It's definitely a reasonable option, and we could always use the boss's orders as well. They're powering up a second Growlithe that we could use boss's orders to bring that up, and that would leave us susceptible to them just hitting us for the knockout as well. So I think we will go for the retreat here. So we're going to retreat into the Heatran GX. We have to discard 1 energy, but that's totally fine. We can move the energies from the Centiskorch VMAX. I think we might as well put all 4 energy onto the active, since we are doing this in order to use Cheryl. And then we will be making use of Cheryl. Just decide if we want to use these energies, but we'll pass on that right now. Healing up the 160 damage, and then we can start reattaching energy onto our Centiskorch VMAX so that we can start attacking with that once again. We'll also use the Giant Hearth to discard our Victini, get our last fire energy out of the deck, and we'll use our Heatran GX attack, and that's going to give us the knockout here, dealing 200 damage. We are burned once again, but that's fine as we're taking a knockout. We even get into a welder, so we will be able to just easily retreat into a Centiskorch if we want to. And this Snorlax with Gormadize does have 130 hit points, so the Heatran here is going to be easily taking a knockout with Steaming Stomp, dealing 130. My opponent is using the Hop to draw 3 cards. They got Pokemon Communication. They're putting Arcanine back in for some reason, even though that's what they want to be attacking with, so but a bit unusual. And they go for the Centiskorch there, it looks like, or is it a different Arcanine? Let's see, it is a different Arcanine. It is with an ability, that's why I thought it was the Centiskorch, but has plus 100 HP if it has a Burning Scarf, and it does 130 damage. And then we just pass over to us with them having the burn on us, so we are taking a little bit of damage, but like I said, that's no big deal. And we can start attaching energy once again onto the Centiskorch, I think, and then using a welder elsewhere perhaps. That seems reasonable, so we'll attach, we'll welder, go on to other Centiskorch here, and we get into some couple of quick balls which aren't going to be super useful, so we can just use these to thin cards out of the deck. Getting rid of our Volcanion here, last Volcanion, we can get ourselves the Victini, and then we'll hold on to the last quick ball, and we could, we don't really need to boss orders. I think we just hit into the active, it's going to be fine overall, so we'll go with that. And Steaming Stomp, knocking out the Snorlax for 130 damage, going down to just 2 prize cards remaining. My opponent hasn't been able to take a knockout just yet, as they do have to go through our Heatran, and then it's going to be back into our Centiskorch VMAX on our end, which is going to be great for us. They do have the Burning Scarf here, so they're going to have a plus 100 HP thanks to the ability that they have. That's a total of 230 HP. That is something that we're going to have to work our way up to, but we could always just go in with our Volcanion and do a little bit of chip damage before we go into our Centiskorch VMAX, which seems like the best course of action here. Of course, we do have the boss's orders as well, so we could always use that to bring up something from my opponent's bench and take an easy knockout that way, since we only have 2 prize cards remaining. And my opponent is dealing 130, which gets the knockout on Heatran, and I do kind of like the play of just using boss's orders here to target down some weaker Pokemon that my opponent has. There's a Centiskorch VMAX, so we can evolve, get the second Centiskorch, which I do like, and we're going to be attaching onto the active so we can do a reasonable amount of damage here. We're currently sitting at 120 damage, which is not the highest, but we are going to be ramping that up, and I don't actually think we have enough to knock anything out other than the Growlithe here. So the Centiskorches have a lot of HP, the Snorlax has 130. So we will just use boss's orders and bring up the Growlithe, and then we're going to be hitting into that and dealing enough for a knockout, 120 like I said, but we also get energy onto the Centiskorch so we can deal more damage in these following turns, and go down to 1 prize card remaining. And since my opponent has the Snorlax on the bench, we can just use boss's orders to bring that up on this following turn, and we will be able to close out this match. My opponent using Giant Hearth to get rid of Giant Hearth, and they don't have any energy left in their deck, or at least they don't want to search out any energy. I'm going to be using Cynthia and Caitlin though to get themselves a welder back into the hand, so they must still have energy left somewhere. And there we go, there is the Fire Crystal, which gets them 3 energy from the discard pile right into their hand, and they can use the welder that they got on their following turn, but of course we are going to be winning on our turn, so they're not going to have a chance to use that welder. Let's see what my opponent does, if they're going to go for the attack here or if they have any other cards to play. They're going to be attaching onto their bench and then hitting us for 130 damage once again, but that is going to be game for us. We can even attach an additional fire energy just for good measure, and we're going to boss these archers up the Snorlax and knock that out for our final prize card. So my opponent just wasn't able to get set up there really. Took them quite a few turns to actually get any Pokemon into play, and really showed off the aggression of our deck as well as the healing ability of Cheryl, making it so that we can use our VMAX multiple times. Let's get into another match. We're starting this match up against the Dragapult V. Seen a little bit of a rise in popularity recently, which is interesting to say the least. I suppose it is just with the decline of Eternatus, being scared of all of the fighting Pokemon around, but the fact that we're going second and we're not able to start with a Volcanion in the active is going to be a huge hindrance to us. So I think we're going to have to be forced to go with an attachment onto the Dedenne. I suppose we could attach onto something if we draw into it, but that does require us to actually draw into it, so I guess we'll go for it. We'll use our Giant Hearth into play and use Professor's Research. Looking for some Pokemon here. We get the Volcanion, but unfortunately no Air Balloon, so we will just put down the Volcanion. We've got the Quick Ball, so we can search for the Centiskorch at the very least, although we do also have the Crobat we can go for, which I do kind of like getting the Crobat here so that we have some additional draw. Otherwise our hand is going to be completely dead if we don't do that. So we can attach onto the Volcanion. We'll use the Evolution Incense and just not take anything. Let's have a look in the discard. We have one in there, so I'm happy enough just to discard another Fire Energy since we have plenty in the deck remaining, and that's going to give us the maximum amount of draw potential from this Crobat. And we do get into the Air Balloon, which is excellent, although we don't have the we don't have a Centiskorch or even a Victini that we can make use of, so we are going to be having to put our energies onto the Volcanion, which is fine. We still have a reasonable attack in Volcanion, using that High Heat Blast for 120, or 110 I should say. It's still going to be enough and some good damage to 2-hit a Pokemon V like the Dragapult here. It's going to have to 3-hit a VMAX, but even if we can use it once and then go into something like a Centiskorch VMAX, we're going to be just fine. My opponent gets a Quick Ball and grabs themselves a Pokemon. Gets into the Clefable here, or the Clefairy I should say, that evolves into Clefable. I'm going to guess that it's the Clefable that's able to remove energy or resets energy, something along those lines anyway. And then they also get a Dedenne of their own, as well as the VMAX here, so they are able to take a knockout with the VMAX, dealing 130 damage and then spreading 50 damage onto my board wherever they desire. So most likely going to be putting that onto something like the Dedenne or Crobat, since they can easily one-hit the Volcanions. There's no point in putting damage onto those, it's just going to be wasted damage. We see a Team Yell Grunt from my opponent, so that resets one of our energies. Bit unfortunate, but we don't really have anywhere else to put the energy anyway, so it is just going to be going onto Volcanion. And since the RTK knockout, our High Heat Blast is only going to be dealing 50 damage, so we really want to be looking for a Welder off of the top deck here. Interesting that they do a little bit of damage onto Volcanion, something that they really didn't need to do. As I said, just wasted damage. We do get a Victini that we can at least put into play if we want to. That will get us towards a Victini VMAX, so that is an option. And we do have the energy as well, so I'll be attaching that onto Victini. And we could always just pass with a Crobat in the active, although that's not going to be too beneficial. Putting Volcanion just gives them a prize as well. Don't really have a lot of good options here. I think I'm going to use Lysander to bring up the Clefairy, try and stall for a turn, and we will be retreating into the Volcanion and using its attack to search out a energy. And yeah, just getting this one energy off a Flare Starter seems really bad for an attack, but we don't have a lot of other options, and it at least thins the deck of a card as well. So let's see if my opponent has the retreat. Yep, they instantly have the Scoop Up Net in order to reset the Clefairy. At the very least, it means that they can't evolve into the Clefable, but they do have another attack off with the Dragapult VMAX, which is going to get them the knockout on our Volcanion, and then they'll most likely be putting 5 damage counters onto our Victini as well. We're just going to be setting that up for damage. We see Crobat from them, drawing cards with Dark Abyssal, and here comes the Gengar and Mimikyu tag team as well, which is going to be able to do a lot of damage if they go for that. We see a Mewtwo coming down, which puts a boss's orders onto the top of their deck. So we're going to be hoping for something like a Marnie here so that we can reset that, but no, in fact the Marnie would just draw it. So yeah, I was thinking Marnie worked like N for some reason there, but Marnie would literally just give them the boss's orders, so we have no way of disrupting that. We're going to put the Dedenne up since it has the air balloon, and we do have the evolution incense that we can make use of to grab ourselves the Victini VMAX. Unfortunately though, we don't have a lot going on. All we have is the VMAX. We can use Giant Heart to discard one of these Pokemon and get 2 fire energy out of the deck to at least thin the deck, and then we can retreat into our Victini VMAX and just go for an attack for 220 damage to hitting this Dragapult VMAX, which is reasonable. They can't get a one-hit knockout on our Victini VMAX, but they are setting up damage on our bench for sure, which is a bit of a worry. My opponent has the Clefable, which I did mention does have an ability which allows you to reset energy. It just goes back into my hand, which is fine because the attack cost of Victini VMAX isn't incredibly high. And they're going to be retreating here, going into the Gengar and Mimikyu, so unless they use the GX attack, the Poltergeist attack isn't actually doing any damage. And yep, as you can see here, they're going for that GX attack, which makes it so that they use the full effect and we have to draw until we have 10 cards, which I'm fine with. I like drawing cards, but it is going to be fueling their Poltergeist attack. We only have 3 trainer cards in our hand, and we can certainly get rid of some of these. So we have Quick Ball, and we can't, of course we can't actually use it, so we can use Giant Hearth I guess to get rid of a Giant Hearth. Can't take anything, which is fine. And I will be hitting into my opponent. No point in doing the first attack, so we'll just hit them for 100. And they're going to be able to hit into us for 100 as well. Of course, if they go into something else like the Dragapult again, they could do more than that. But they don't know how many trainer cards we have available, so they're probably hoping that we have a lot more in our hand than we actually do. You see the Scoop Up Net, which puts the Mewtwo as well as the Clefable back into their hand. And the Mewtwo is going to be giving them a Team Yell Grunt back onto the top of their deck. I have to remember that they did put a boss's orders on top of their deck, so they could use that here in order to bring up our Crobat or Dedenne. Let's see what they go for. It's just the Poltergeist for 100 damage, as I said. So certainly building up damage. They will be able to get a knockout, I believe. That'll put us up to 280 if they hit us with the Dragapult. So not too worried, but we are struggling to get a knockout since we can't knock out this Gengar and Mimikyu at the moment. We have the Quick Ball that we can make use of to discard something. We'll get rid of the Giant Hearth and get into a different Pokemon here. I think getting a Centiskorch is going to be a good attacker, so we'll start building up one of those and attaching energy onto him. We'll go with that, and yeah, there's not much else that we want to do here. We could always retreat into Heatran, but we wouldn't have enough energy, so we'll just go for an attack once again and hit our opponent for 100 damage. If they go for the Poltergeist again, they're only going to be dealing 50 damage this time around. Perhaps should have used the Giant Hearth to discard the Great Catcher as well, but I kind of want to keep the Great Catcher around just in case we need to use it to bring up this Gengar and Mimikyu. But there is the Team Yell Grunt as well as the Clefable. That's going to reset both of our energy, so we don't actually have an attack now. That is definitely going to set us back unless we're able to top deck a Welder, of course. So let's see what we get. We get the energy, so I guess the Clefable puts the energy on top of the deck, so we're actually not able to draw whatsoever, which is a bit unfortunate. and we don't have any way of doing anything really. Suppose we could use Victini's first attack to put some extra energy into play, which is probably the most sensible thing here, and definitely what I'm going to go for. So I'm going to get 3 energy into play. I'm going to put a bunch of them onto the active. I think we could put perhaps all 3 onto the active, because then if they get another Team Yell plus maybe like a Crushing Hammer, that would help us out, but 2 is going to be fine I think. And we'll also put 1 onto the Centiskorch, of course, so that if we get into the VMAX we can attack with the Centiskorch. So let's see what they have. Again, they're only going to be dealing 50 damage with the Poltergeist, so this could be the time that they retreat into the Dragapult VMAX and get a knockout that way. If they do, then we could likely hit back with the Centiskorch if we're able to draw into that. If not, then we can just use our Heatran GX in our hand in order to deal damage that way. We'll have to see what my opponent has for us. They are taking their time to decide what they want to do. They are going to manually retreat here, so they don't even have a switch out, and they are going to be bringing up that Dragapult VMAX and hitting us for 130 to get the knockout. Really wanting to deal with our Victini VMAX, which is fine with me because, as I said, we have the Heatran as a response here in order to get the knockout, and then my opponent won't have any energy in play. They also didn't get the Scoop Up Net to reset that Clefable, so we don't have any risk of that. The only thing that we're really scared of is the fact that my opponent has the boss's orders, but like I said, they don't have any attackers available to them since they've lost all of their energy. So we're going to draw here. We get a Professor Research. Could hold on to that. We could get knocked out, but I mean, gonna have to have a lot for us to get knocked out if they have a Poltergeist and some other crazy combo. So I'm quite happy here just to attach energy onto our Centiskorch. It is going to be moved here anyway, so we plate down our Heatran, retreat into the Heatran, and that allows us to move energy across to it. So moving all 3 energy onto the Heatran, we can deal our regular Steaming Stomp attack, which is going to be enough for the knockout. Don't want to be discarding this hand, so I really want to keep the energy and be playing that down. And as I said, Steaming Stomp for the knockout, 130 damage, destroys the Dragapult VMAX, and we're finally able to take prize cards. And like I said, we don't have any worries here as my opponent doesn't have any energy in play. They could promote the Gengar Mimikyu, but in doing that they are going to be losing themselves the game. Yes, they only have 1 prize card remaining, but like I said, this game isn't over yet and we're still in it. So my opponent promotes the Gengar and Mimikyu. They're really going for it, not unless they have a way of switching out, but there's the energy coming onto the Gengar Mimikyu. They've got the Crushing Hammer, which does hit aheads, so perhaps they're able to get multiple Crushing Hammers, which would theoretically ruin us, but we do get into the Welder from our prize cards, so my opponent doesn't know that. They think that we're still drawing dead. And let's see what they go for. They have the boss's orders, which is fine. We do have the Evolution Incense, and there we go. My opponent gives us the well played. We even draw into the Centiskorch VMAX, so we don't even need the Evolution Incense here, and we have the Welder to attach 2 energy, and we can even manually attach 1 for good measure as well. And that is going to be game for my opponent, finally getting the knockout. And like I said, we just have to hold on there until the very end and very safely navigate that matchup. Very interesting game in the way that we had to play, but it's really showed off the power of the deck, both Victini VMAX dealing extra damage to Pokemon V, as well as Volcanion holding its own, and then Centiskorch VMAX coming clutch at the end there. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a like down below, and I'll see you in the next one.